Eighth grade. Happy terrific Tuesday. I hope you guys are feeling good. I hope that you found a routine that's working for you and that you're keeping a good sleep schedule. I just want you to know that all your grown-ups are thinking of you, and we're looking forward to next time we can all be together. Today we're going to continue reading Night. Our goal today is going to be 10 pages again. Think about it. If we keep doing 10 pages every day, by Friday of this week, we will have already read 100 pages since we last left school. That's pretty dope. Our book is also only 117 pages, so we're going to be reading this more quickly than any grades ever read it before. So great job, guys, letting yourselves be a part of this accelerated program. We're going to start reading today on page 56, and we're going to start right after the break in the page, right down here. Ellie has started talking about some of the experiences he's having in his labor assignments with his fellow Jews who are prisoners as well. We read a really, really challenging section yesterday where Ellie's crown on his tooth was extracted with the use of a rusty spoon. It's just really clear to us that everyone's really, really desperate. And it kind of seems to me like there's a sense of lawlessness right now in Ellie's life. There really aren't any rules. It's just a game of survival. I want you to know that the first part that we're going to read today is pretty graphic. It's going to involve some sexual assault that Ellie witnessed. And if it's something that you want to discuss more, we absolutely can. But I'm sort of going to go through it quickly so that we aren't focusing too much on that part and are more focusing on Ellie's experiences that occurred because of that. If at any point in time you need to pause this reading today because it gets intense and heavy, please do that. Make sure that you're taking care of yourself. And don't forget, thank you to Max and to Kareem and everyone who's been sending me your comprehension answers. If you have access to the technology that makes it possible, please go to the classwork tab in the middle of your Google Classroom, select the Night comprehension questions and graphic organizers, and continue to fill those in as we work. I'm super impressed with a lot of you, but I know it's not possible for all of us to do that. Do your best. Do what you can. You guys are responsible, and I trust you very heavily with your education and your learning. So we're starting at the middle of page 56 today. A few days before the Poles left, I had a novel experience. It was on a Sunday morning. Our commando was not required to work that day. Only Idek would not hear of staying in the camp. We had to go to the depot. This sudden enthusiasm for work astonished us. At the depot, Idek entrusted us to Franek, saying, "Do what you like, but do something, or else you'll hear from me." And he disappeared. We didn't know what to do. Tired of huddling on the ground, we each took turns strolling through the warehouse in the hope of finding something, a piece of bread perhaps, that a civilian might have forgotten there. When I reached the back of the building, I heard the sounds coming from a small adjoining room. I moved closer, and I had a glimpse of Idek and a young Polish girl, half naked on a straw mat. Now I understood why Idek refused to leave us in the camp. He moved 100 prisoners so that he could copulate with this girl. It struck me as terribly funny, and I burst out laughing. Idek jumped, turned, and saw me, while the girl tried to cover her breasts. I wanted to run away, but my feet were nailed to the floor. Idek grabbed me by the throat. Hissing at me, he threatened, "Just you wait, kid. You will see what it costs to leave your work. You'll pay for this later. And now, go back to your place." A half hour before the usual time to stop work, the capo assembled the entire commando. Roll call. Nobody understood what was going on. A roll call at this hour? Here? Only I knew. The capo made a short speech. An ordinary inmate does not have the right to mix into other people's affairs. One of you does not seem to have understood this point, and I shall therefore try to make him understand clearly once and for all. I felt the sweat running down my back. A7713. I stepped forward. A crate, he ordered. They brought a crate. Lie down on it, on your belly. I obeyed. I no longer felt anything except for the lashes of the whip. 1, 2, he was counting. He took his time between lashes. Only the first really hurt. I heard him count. 10, 11. His voice was calm and reached me through a thick wall. 23. 2 more, I thought, half unconscious. The capo was waiting. 24. 25. It was over. I had not realized it, but I had fainted. I came to and they doused me with cold water. I was still lying on the crate in a blur, and I could see the wet ground next to me. Then I heard someone yell. It had to be the capo. I began to distinguish that he was what he was shouting. Stand up! I must have made some movement to get up, but I felt myself fall back on the crate. How I wanted to get up! Stand up! He was yelling even more loudly. If only I could answer him. If only I could tell him that I could not move. But my mouth would not open. At Idik's command, 2 inmates lifted me and led me to him. Look me in the eye. I looked at him without seeing. I was thinking of my father. He would be suffering more than I. Listen to me, you son of a swine, said Idik coldly. So much for your curiosity. You shall receive 5 times more if you dare tell anyone what you saw. Understood? I nodded, once, 10 times, endlessly, as if my head had decided to say yes for all eternity. One Sunday, as half of our group, including my father, was at work, the others, including me, took the opportunity to stay and to rest. At around 10 o'clock, the siren started to go off. Alert. The block of Litesse gathered us inside the blocks, while the SS took refuge in the shelters. As it was relatively easy to escape during an alert, the guards left the watchtowers and the electric current in the barbed wire was cut. The standing order to any SS was to shoot anyone found outside of his block. In no time, the camp had the look of an abandoned ship. No living souls in the alleys. Next to the kitchen, 2 cauldrons of hot, steaming soup had been left untended. 2 cauldrons of soup. Smack in the middle of the road, the cauldrons of soup with no one to guard them. A royal feast going to waste. Supreme temptation. Hundreds of eyes were looking at them, shining with desire. 2 lambs with hundreds of wolves lying in wait for them. 2 lambs without a shepherd, free for the taking. But who would dare? Fear was greater than hunger. Suddenly, we saw the door of Block 37 open slightly. A man appeared, crawling snake-like in the direction of the cauldrons. So I want to pause briefly. So right now they're on alert. That means that the soldiers that are in charge of the concentration camp have reason to believe that there might be a bombing or some planes flying overhead, and they want to make sure that if the planes are flying overhead, that the camp looks empty. So if all people are hidden inside, it doesn't look like anything's happening at the concentration camp. It just looks like it's an empty facility. They are cutting the wire for the barbed wire. They're getting the guards out of the towers. So there's nobody like really protecting and watching out. Because it's so easy to escape, the SS have the rule that if you try to even leave the building you're in, you'll be shot on the spot, right? But outside of their dining building, there are 2 cauldrons of soup, and these men are starved, okay? So Ellie is talking about how the soup is like a lamb, and how all of the inmates are like wolves, waiting to pounce on their prey, ready to completely devour it, right? Notice that lack of humanization. Notice how Ellie even recognizes that they are more like animalistic right now in their attempts at survival. Now, we know if anybody leaves their house, leaves their barracks, they're going to get shot. So do the inmates, okay? And Ellie is noticing that one man has started to crawl towards the cauldrons, and everybody in the camp is watching. Let's continue. Hundreds of eyes were watching his every move. Hundreds of men were crawling with him. scraping their bodies with his on the stones. All hearts trembled, but mostly with envy. He was the one who had dared. He reached the first cauldron. Hearts were pounding harder. He had succeeded. Jealousy devoured us, consumed us. I want you guys to notice that all of the adjectives Ellie is using right now to talk about their emotions, those are eating-based adjectives. Devouring, consuming, right? His hunger is at the top of his level, and everything in his life is like food right now. We never thought to admire him. Poor hero, committing suicide for a ration or two more of soup. In our minds, he was already dead. Lying on the ground near the cauldron, he was trying to lift himself to the cauldron's rim. Either out of weakness or out of fear, he remained there, undoubtedly to muster his strength. At last, he succeeded in pulling himself up to the rim. For a second, he seemed to be looking at himself in the soup, looking at his ghostly reflection there. Then, for no apparent reason, he let out a terrible scream, a death rattle such as I had never heard before. And with mouth open, he thrust his head towards the still steaming liquid. We all jumped at the sound of the shot. Falling to the ground, his face stained by the soup, the man writhed for a few seconds at the base of the cauldron, and then he was still. That was when we began to hear the planes. Almost at the same moment, the barrack began to shake. "They're bombing the Buna factory!" someone shouted. Remember, the Buna factory? That's where Ellie and his dad have to go to work, but today Ellie is at home. But where's his dad? I anxiously thought of my father, who was at work. I was glad, nevertheless, to watch that factory go up in flames. What revenge! While we had heard some talk of German military defeats on the various fronts, we were not sure if they were credible. But today, this was real. We were not afraid, and yet if a bomb had fallen on the blocks, it would have claimed hundreds of inmates' lives. But we no longer feared death. In any event, not this particular death. Every bomb that hit filled us with joy. It gave us renewed confidence. Remember, that's how Ellie's feeling, and he knows that his dad is there. The raid lasted more than 1 hour. If only it could have gone on for 10 times 10 hours. Then, once more, there was silence. The last sound of the American plane dissipated into the wind, and there we were, in our cemetery. On the horizon, we saw a long trail of black smoke. The sirens began to wail. The end of the alert. Everyone came out of their blocks. We breathed in air filled with fire and smoke, and our eyes shone with hope. A bomb had landed in the middle of the camp, near the Appalats, the assembly point, but it had not exploded. We had to dispose of it outside of the camp. The head of the camp, the Lager Lattès, accompanied by his aide and by the chief capo, were on an inspection tour of the camp. The raid had left traces of fear on his face. In the center of the camp lay the body of the man with the soup stains on his face, the only victim. The cauldrons were carried back to the kitchen. The SS were back at their posts in the watchtowers, behind their machine guns. Intermission was over. An hour later, we saw the commandos returning, in step as always. Happily, I caught sight of my father. Several buildings were flattened, he said, but the depot was not touched. In the afternoon, we cheerfully went to clear the ruins. His dad survived. His dad is okay. His dad was in a separate building than the ones that were destroyed. Some important words for us to recognize right now. Context clues are given. Appelplatz, yeah, that's the assembly point. So I want you to picture, like, if you've seen the Hunger Games, and there's the place at the beginning of the first one where Katniss is, like, standing with everybody lined up and people are speaking, right? Or you can maybe picture that's, like, our meeting space at school is the dining room. So it's like a meeting space where everyone comes together for roll calls to be counted and stuff like that. We're going to hear about it a lot in the next few pages. The Lager Lattès is the head of the camp, who would be a Nazi soldier, Nazi member. And remember that in this situation, the Lager Lattes has an aide that they're accompanied by, and then the chief capo. So the chief Jewish person who they are using to control and determine all the rules and stuff for the Jewish prisoners. Page 61, bottom half, we're going to go to 68 today. Page 68. 1 week later, as we returned from work, there in the middle of the camp, in the Appelplatz, stood a black gallows. Gallows are what you might see in really old-time movies. It's where people would be hanged as a punishment. We learned that soup would be distributed only after roll call, which lasted longer than usual. The orders were given more harshly than on other days, and there were strange vibrations in the air. "Caps off!" the Lager Lattes suddenly shouted. 10,000 caps came off at once. "Cover your heads!" 10,000 caps were back on our heads. At lightning speed. The camp gate opened. An SS unit appeared and encircled us. 1 SS every 3 paces. The machine guns on the watchtowers were pointed towards the Appelplatz. "They're expecting trouble," whispered Julich. 2 SS were headed towards the solitary confinement cell. They came back, the condemned man between them. He was a young boy from Warsaw, an inmate with 3 years in concentration camps behind him. He was tall and strong, a giant compared to me. His back was to the gallows, and his face turned towards the judge, the head of the camp. He was pale, but he seemed more solemn than frightened. His manacled hands did not tremble. Vocab word, manacled means handcuffed. His eyes were coolly assessing the hundreds of SS guards, the thousands of prisoners surrounding him. The Lager Lattes began to read the verdict, emphasizing every word. In the name of Reichsfuhrer Himmler, prisoner number stole during the air raid. According to the law, prisoner number is condemned to death. Let this be a warning and an example to all prisoners. So they're hanging this man right now because during the raid, he broke in somewhere and stole things. And they're going to hang him in front of all of the other inmates so that everyone sees this is what's going to happen to you if you don't follow the rules. This is another instance of when fear is being used to control people. And it reminds me of other things that we've read and other things that we've talked about and discussed together in class. Nobody moved. I heard the pounding of my heart, the thousands of people who died daily in Auschwitz and in Birkenau, and the crematoria, no longer troubled me. But this boy, leaning up against the gallows, upset me deeply. "This ceremony, will it be over soon? I'm hungry," whispered Julich. At a sign of the Lager Lattes, the Lager Capo stepped up to the condemned youth. He was assisted by 2 prisoners, in exchange for 2 bowls of soup. The Capo wanted to blindfold the youth, but he refused. After what seemed like a long moment, the hangman put the rope around his neck. He was about to signal his aides to pull the chair from under the young man's feet when the latter shouted in a strong and calm voice, "Long live liberty, my curse on Germany, my curse, my..." The executioner had completed his work. Like a sword, the order cut through the air. "Caps off!" 10,000 prisoners paid their respects. "Cover your heads!" Then the entire camp, block after block, filed past the hanged boy, and stared at his extinguished eyes, the tongue hanging from his gaping mouth. The capos forced everyone to look at him squarely in the face. I think the reason that they made everyone look at him is so that they could have everyone recognize they don't want that to happen to them and that they're going to make different choices than he did. Afterward, we were given permission to go back to our blocks to have our meal. I remember on that evening, the soup tasted better than ever. I watched other hangings. I never saw a single victim weep. These withered bodies had long forgotten the bitter taste of tears. Except once. The Oberkapo of the 52nd Cable Commando was a Dutchman, a giant of a man, well over 6 feet. He had some 700 prisoners under his command, and they all loved him like a brother. Nobody had ever endured a blow or even an insult from him. In his service was a young boy, a pipel as they were called. This one had a delicate and beautiful face, an incredible sight in the camp. So the pipel means the little boy, okay? In Buna, the pipel were hated. They often displayed greater cruelty than their elders. Once I saw them, one of them, a boy of 13, beat his father for not making his bed properly. As the old man quietly wept, the boy was yelling, "If you don't stop crying instantly, I will no longer bring you bread. Understood?" But the Dutch man's little servant was beloved by all. His was the face of an angel in distress. One day, the power failed at the central electric plant in Buna. The Gestapo, summoned to inspect the damage, concluded that it was sabotage. Remember, sabotage is when people do something on purpose. So the power failed, it was sabotage. That means somebody cut the power and caused it to fail. It wasn't just a defect or a problem. They found a trail. It led to the block of the Dutch Oberkapo, and after a search, they found a significant quantity of weapons. The Oberkapo was arrested on the spot. He was tortured for weeks on end in vain. He gave no names. He was transferred to Auschwitz, and then he was never heard from again. But his young pupil remained behind in solitary confinement. He too was tortured, but he too remained silent. The SS then had condemned him to death, him and 2 other inmates who had been found to possess arms. So guys, as you might imagine right now, the Dutch man and his pupil had been finding and stealing and hiding weapons. What do you think that they would be hiding and stealing weapons for? Yes, Hamira. For a rebellion, right? They were trying to store up weapons to be able to fight back and to free themselves. And unfortunately, they were caught. One day, as we returned from work, we saw 3 gallows, 3 black ravens erected on the Appelplatz. Roll call. The SS surrounding us, machine guns aimed at us, the usual ritual. 3 prisoners in chains, and among them the little pipel, the sad-eyed angel. The SS seemed more preoccupied, more worried than usual. To hang a child in front of thousands of onlookers was not a small matter. The head of the camp had read the verdict. All eyes were on the child. He was pale, almost calm, but he was biting his lips as he stood in the shadow of the gallows. This time, the Lager Capo refused to act as the executioner. The 3 SS took his place. So the head capo said, "No, I can't do this," because of the brutality and because of the lack of justice in hanging a child publicly. The 3 condemned prisoners stepped up onto the chairs. In unison, the nooses were placed around their necks. "Long live liberty!" shouted the 2 men. But the boy was silent. "Where is merciful God? Where is he?" someone behind me was asking. At the signal, the 3 chairs were tipped over. Total silence in the camp. On the horizon, the sun was setting. "Caps off!" screamed the Lagerletesse. His voice quivered. As for the rest of us, we were weeping. "Cover your heads!" Then came the march past the victims. The 2 men were no longer alive. Their tongues were hanging out, swollen and bluish. But the 3rd rope was still moving. The child, too light, was still breathing. And so he remained for more than a half an hour, lingering between life and death, writhing before our eyes, and we were forced to look at him close range. He was still alive when I passed him. His tongue was still red, his eyes not yet extinguished. Behind me, I heard the same man asking, "For God's sake, where is God?" And from within me, I heard the answer. "Where is he? This is where, hanging here from these gallows." That night, The soup tasted of corpses. The summer was coming to an end. The Jewish year was almost over. On the eve of Rosh Hashanah, the last day of that cursed year, the entire camp was agitated, and every one of us felt the tension. After all, this was a day unlike all others. The last day of the year. The word last had an odd ring to it. What if it really were the last day? That evening meal was distributed, an especially thick soup, but nobody touched it. We wanted to wait until after prayer. On the apple plots, surrounded by electrified barbed wire, thousands of Jews, anguish on their faces, gathered in silence. Night was falling rapidly, and more prisoners kept coming from every block, suddenly able to overcome time and space, to will both into submission. What are you, my God? I thought angrily. How do you compare to this stricken mass gathered to affirm to you their faith, their anger, and their defiance? What does your grandeur mean, Master of the universe, in the face of all of this cowardice, this decay, and this misery? Why do you go on troubling these poor people's wounded minds and ailing their bodies? Ellie's mad at God. Ellie doesn't understand why God's doing what he is, and Ellie doesn't think that God is good or on his side anymore. He's saying, where are you? How are you letting this happen? Enough is enough. Some 10,000 men had come to participate in a solemn service, including the Bloc Étatistes, the Capos, all bureaucrats in the service of death. Blessed be the Almighty. The voice of the officiating inmate had just become more audible. At first I thought that it was just the wind. Blessed be God's name. Thousands of lips repeated the benediction, bent over like trees in a storm. Blessed be God's name? Why? But why would I bless him? Every fiber in me rebelled. Because he caused thousands of children to burn in his mass graves? Because he kept 6 crematoria working day and night, including Sabbath and the holy days? Because his great might, he had created Auschwitz, Birkenau, Buna, and so many other factories of death. How could I say to him, blessed be thou, almighty master of the universe, who chose us among all nations to be tortured day and night, to watch our fathers, our mothers, our brothers end up in the furnaces? Praised be thy holy name for having chosen us to be slaughtered on thine altar. I listened as the inmate's voice rose. It was powerful yet broken. Amid the weeping and the sobbing was the sighing of the entire congregation. All of the earth and universe are God's. He kept pausing as though he lacked the strength to uncover the meaning beneath the text. The melody was stifled in his throat. And I, the former mystic, was thinking, yes, man is stronger and greater than God. When Adam and Eve deceived you chased them from paradise. Remember, capital Y, just like capital H for he, means that Ellie's referring to God. When you were displeased by Noah's generation, you brought down the flood. When Sodom lost your favor, you caused the heavens to rain down fire and damnation. But look at these men whom you have betrayed, allowing them to be tortured, slaughtered, gassed, and burned. What did they do? They pray before you. They praise your name. All of creation bears witness to the greatness of God. In days gone by, Rosh Hashanah had dominated my life. I knew that my sins grieved the Almighty, and so I pleaded for forgiveness. In those days, I fully believed that the salvation of the world depended on every one of my deeds, on every one of my prayers. But now, I no longer pleaded for anything. I was no longer able to lament. On the contrary, I felt very strong. I was the accuser, God the accused. My eyes had opened, and I was alone, terribly alone, in a world without God, without man, without love or mercy. And I was nothing but ashes now. But I felt myself to be stronger than this Almighty, to whom my life had been bound for so long. In the midst of these men assembled for prayer, I felt like an observer, a stranger. The service ended with the Kaddish. Remember, the Kaddish is the funeral prayer for the Jewish faith. Each of us recited Kaddish for his parents, for his children, and for himself. We remained standing in the apple plots for a long time, unable to detach ourselves from this surreal moment. Then came the time to go to sleep, and slowly the inmates returned to their blocks. I thought I heard them wishing each other Happy New Year. I ran to look for my father. At the same time, I was afraid of having to wish him a Happy New Year in which I no longer believed. He was leaning against the wall, bent shoulders sagging as if under a heavy load. When I went up to him, I took his hand and kissed it. I felt a tear on my hand. Whose was it? Mine? His? I said nothing, nor did he. Never before had we understood each other so clearly. The sound of the bell brought us back to reality. We had to go to bed. We came back from very far away. I looked up at my father's face, trying to glimpse a smile or something like it on her stricken face. But there is nothing, not the shadow of an expression. Defeat. That's where we finish for today. Head over to your comprehension questions. There are a ton of them that you can answer after today's reading. And as always, make sure you're checking back in the text so that you can cite your evidence. And feel free to rewind this video and rewatch parts as you hear questions being asked about them. When you're done, go ahead and tune in for our quick vocabulary YouTube video quiz on Friday. Love you guys. See you soon. Bye.